When you find yourself after the storm of deconstruction, when the temples of your certainty have been torn apart brick by brick, when every doctrine, every structure, every image of God you once carried in your mind lies broken on the ground, there arises within you a terrible silence. At first it feels like loss, an abandonment, as though the very soul has been emptied out of its sanctuary. Yet, in this void, there is the beginning of revelation. For what collapses is not the eternal, but only the scaffolding erected by human hands, only the brittle forms that could not contain the living fire of truth. Deconstruction is a death, and like every death, it opens the gates of rebirth. I have seen this in dreams. A vast cathedral, once radiant, now reduced to ash and ruin. The dreamer stands barefoot upon the cold stone floor, trembling before the destruction, yet as he looks again, the rubble becomes fertile soil. From the cracks in the foundation sprout green shoots, alive with morning dew. The walls that once enclosed him have been blown apart, and now the horizon stretches infinitely in every direction. Such dreams are the language of the soul. They teach us that in destruction lies liberation. When the outer edifice falls, the inner life, which had been imprisoned, finally breathes. For the empath, this moment of deconstruction is particularly perilous, and also particularly promising. The empath lives by resonance, by the subtle and invisible threads that connect soul to soul. You feel the sorrows of others as if they were your own. You carry burdens that were never meant to be yours, and in the great collapse of belief, you may feel as if you are carrying not only your own ruins, but the ruins of the entire world. Yet here lies the hidden truth. The empath is not destroyed by deconstruction. The empath is refined by it. Stripped of borrowed images, you are left with the raw power of perception itself, unmediated, direct, alive. Empathy is a double-edged gift. It is both wound and strength, both curse and possibility. Many of you who identify as empaths have lived your lives as though you were porous, defenseless against the suffering around you. You absorb it, internalize it, drown in it, and call it compassion. But true compassion is not absorption. True compassion is presence, rooted in the depths of your own soul. To deconstruct is to see that the roles you were given, healer, caretaker, savior, were masks placed upon you by others. When those masks burn away, what emerges is not fragility, but essence, not exhaustion, but the radiant clarity of being. Consider the archetype of the wounded healer. This is no mere symbol, but a living reality of the psyche. The wound is the gateway through which the healer is born. To be an empath is to carry such a wound, an early fracture of identity, often born in childhood, where your sensitivity became survival. You learn to attune yourself to the moods of the parent, the tremors of the household, the unspoken tensions of the tribe. It was not love, but necessity. And so your gift was forged in fire. You became adept at reading what was hidden. You could sense what others denied. You carried within you the forgotten cries of the unconscious, yet such a gift left unconscious enslaves. You mistake it for identity. You say, "This is who I am." And in saying so, you remain bound. Deconstruction reveals that what you thought was your identity is only a strategy of survival, an adaptation of the psyche. The true self lies deeper. It is not the mask of the empath, but the soul that perceives through empathy, the eternal subject who stands beyond roles. When the old belief system collapses, when the outer cathedral crumbles, you are confronted by the question, who am I, apart from the roles I have played? It is here that the true power of the empath begins to shine. The true power of the empath is not to lose yourself in others, but to mirror the hidden depths of their being. You do not exist to absorb their pain, but to reveal it. You are the mirror of the soul, and in your gaze, others encounter what they have long buried. But in order for this to happen, you must first deconstruct your own illusions. You must see that what you carried was never yours, that what you felt so deeply was often a projection, an echo, an archetype moving through the collective. Only then can you stand as yourself. Luminous and unshaken, dreams reveal this process. I once analyzed the dream of a woman who described standing at the edge of an endless ocean. The tide rose and fell, and with it came voices, countless voices of suffering, of despair, of longing. She felt she would drown in them, as though the ocean itself demanded her life. Yet in the dream, a figure appeared behind her, a woman clothed in white, radiant, silent. The figure placed a hand upon her shoulder and whispered, "You are not the ocean. You are the shore." The dream ended, but its message remained. The empath is not the suffering of the world. You are the vessel that gives it form, the consciousness that can witness without drowning. This is the secret of individuation. To become who you are, not who the world has demanded you be. For the empath, individuation means reclaiming the boundary between self and other, learning to distinguish the soul's own voice from the cries of the collective. It means recognizing that you are not merely a sponge for the emotions of others, but a conscious center through which meaning emerges. When you step into this realization, empathy ceases to be a burden and becomes a power. Do not mistake me. This journey is not easy. It demands the descent into shadow, the confrontation with the very parts of yourself you have hidden. For many empaths, the shadow is filled with anger, resentment, envy, even cruelty. You have repressed these emotions for the sake of appearing kind, for the sake of being the healer. Yet in doing so, you have only bound yourself in chains. Individuation demands that you face these shadows, not as enemies, but as teachers. The anger you repress is the fire of your own will. The envy you deny is the longing for your unlived life. The cruelty you fear is the raw force of your own power. Unintegrated, disowned, by facing these shadows, you discover that they are not demons, but fragments of your own wholeness. This confrontation can be terrifying. Many fall into despair at this stage, believing that the discovery of darkness within means they have failed. But this is an illusion born of dualistic thinking, light and dark, good and evil, compassion and cruelty. These are polarities, and the soul is the vessel in which they are reconciled. To be whole is to carry both. To be real is to integrate, not to deny. The empath's true power is not fragile kindness, but fierce wholeness. It is the capacity to stand in the presence of suffering without drowning, to witness both the shadow and the light without collapsing into either. Thus, life after deconstruction is not emptiness but fullness. It is the rebirth of the self beyond illusion. You discover that empathy is not about merging, but about mirroring, not about absorption, but about revelation. You become the one who stands at the threshold between worlds, perceiving the unconscious of the other, yet rooted in your own soul. And in this rootedness lies your gift. The archetypes themselves shift in this process. The empath who once lived as the wounded child becomes the sage, the seer, the mediator of the collective unconscious. Your sensitivity is no longer a wound, but an instrument. You can discern patterns invisible to others. You can give voice to the silenced. You can reveal meaning hidden beneath chaos. But this requires courage. The courage to stand alone, the courage to resist the temptation, to collapse into the suffering of others, the courage to live as yourself. Think of the myth of Persephone. She descends into the underworld, abducted, consumed by darkness, yet it is there, in the land of death, that she becomes queen. She does not escape the underworld. She integrates it in her dual existence, half above, half below. She embodies the rhythm of life and death, descent and return. So too must the empath descend into the underworld of the self, into the deconstruction of all that once seemed certain. And there, in the shadows, you find not annihilation but enthronement. You become sovereign over your own depths. This is why I tell you, do not fear the collapse. Do not mourn the ruins of your old belief system. They have served their purpose. The gods you once imagined, the structures you once clung to, were scaffolds, leading you here to this threshold. Beyond them lies the living mystery, the self that encompasses all. When you stand in that mystery, when you live from the depths of your own being, you discover that empathy is no longer a prison. It is a key opening you to the vastness of the human soul. And so I ask you, will you remain bound to the illusions of the past, carrying the suffering of the world as if it were your own? Or will you step into the wholeness that deconstruction has offered you, standing as yourself, luminous, unshaken, alive? The choice is yours. But the path is already before you. Life after deconstruction is not an end. It is the beginning of the true power of the empath, Life after deconstruction does not arrive with fanfare. It arrives with silence. The silence frightens you, for you were accustomed to voices, voices of authority, of doctrine, of culture, of family that told you who you were and what you must become. Now, after the collapse, those voices have been hushed. At first you wander in confusion, as though abandoned in a wilderness without a map. But in this wilderness, the soul begins to speak. And the voice of the soul is not loud, it is quiet, like water seeping through stone, patient and enduring. To hear it requires solitude. It requires the willingness to stop grasping for certainty and to allow the depths to reveal themselves in their own time. The empath, more than any other, resists this silence. You have lived attuned to others for so long that solitude feels like annihilation. Your very identity has been defined by resonance with the external. But when deconstruction strips away the borrowed garments, solitude becomes the crucible. In solitude, you discover that your sensitivity does not vanish when there is no other to absorb. Instead, it turns inward. You begin to feel the subtle textures of your own being, the forgotten layers of your psyche, the long exiled voices within. At first, they frighten you. The shadow arises, whispering of anger, desire, despair, hunger. You recoil, for these do not fit the image of the good empath you try to maintain. But to turn away is to remain enslaved. To face them is to begin the work of integration. Integration is the true alchemy. It is not about eliminating the shadow, but about transmuting it, recognizing its place in the totality of the self. When you embrace the shadow, you discover that the darkness is not absence, but potency. Anger, when acknowledged, becomes will. Desire, when honored, becomes creativity. Fear, when faced, becomes intuition. The empath's sensitivity, once bound in unconscious projections, becomes the organ of vision, the instrument through which the depths of the collective are perceived. This is no longer absorption. This is illumination. The mythologies of the world testify to this transformation. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the soul stands before the scales, its heart weighed against the feather of truth. This is the judgment of integration. All the hidden parts of the psyche are brought forth, and the soul must confront what it carries. For the empath, this judgment is lived in the present. You stand before the scales each day, measuring the weight of what you have absorbed, discerning what is truly yours and what belongs to others. And when you release what was never yours, your heart grows lighter. The empath's true power is a heart that can remain light even while perceiving the heaviest truths. Dreams guide this passage. A man once told me of a dream where he carried an immense sack upon his back filled with stones. Each stone bore a name: mother, father, friend, stranger. He stumbled under the weight, convinced that without him the stones would be lost. But in the dream, a figure appeared, a wise old man, an archetype of the self, the figure said, "Drop the sack. The stones are not yours to carry." And when the man obeyed, the ground itself opened, swallowing the stones into the earth. From that place, a tree grew, vast and radiant, its branches touching the sky. The dream revealed the truth. What we release returns to the earth, and from it, new life is born. The empath does not save others by carrying them, but by releasing them to their own soil, allowing each soul to grow its own tree. In the process of deconstruction, faith itself undergoes transformation. The God you once worshipped was an image, a projection of the unconscious clothed in human garments. When that image collapses, many believe God is gone. But in truth, what collapses is the idol. The living God, the archetype of the self, remains untouched, hidden deeper than the structures that housed him. For the empath, this realization is crucial. You must learn that what you resonated with in others was often their projection of the divine, their yearning for wholeness. You mistook it for your responsibility. But now, after deconstruction, you see that the divine does not ask to be carried, it asks to be revealed. Your gift is not to save others, but to mirror the divine spark already within them. This mirroring is a sacred act. It requires that you stand rooted in your own being, unafraid of the shadows reflected back to you. When someone's pain appears in your presence, it is not because you are destined to drown in it, but because your soul has become a clear mirror in which their truth can appear. Many will resist this reflection, for it confronts them with their denied selves. They may blame you, despise you, withdraw from you. This too is part of the path, for the mirror is both gift and provocation. It awakens those who are ready, and it unsettles those who are not. To live as such a mirror requires courage beyond sentimentality. Sentimentality drowns in pity. True empathy does not pity. It perceives, and perception is sharp, cutting through illusions, unmasking lies, revealing wounds. The empath's power, once unconscious, was used to soothe, to merge, to dissolve boundaries. But the conscious empath does not dissolve. The conscious empath reveals, and revelation is a sacred fire. It burns away pretense, leaving only the essence. You may ask, but what of love? What of compassion? I tell you, love without truth is not love. It is dependency. Compassion without clarity is not compassion. It is enmeshment. The truest love is born of wholeness, not of need. The truest compassion flows from one who has embraced both light and shadow, who can sit with suffering without being consumed by it. When you live in such love, you no longer confuse empathy with martyrdom. You become a source, not a sponge. You give without depletion, because you are not giving from your survival wounds, but from the inexhaustible well of the self. The self is the center that holds all opposites It is the archetype of wholeness, the image of God within the psyche. Life after deconstruction is the journey toward this center. For the empath, it is the realization that your sensitivity is not a weakness but a compass, pointing you toward the depths of being. It shows you what others cannot see, not so you may drown in it, but so you may name it, bring it to light, and in doing so, help others become whole. I tell you a final image. Imagine a chalice, delicate, translucent. Once, you believed your role was to be filled with the sorrows of others, until you cracked beneath the weight. But after deconstruction, you see that the chalice is not meant to be filled, but to reflect. When the light enters, it refracts into colors unseen, casting beauty into the world. This is the empath's true power, not to carry, not to absorb, but to reveal the hidden spectrum of the soul. Therefore, I say to you, embrace the silence after deconstruction, for in that silence your soul will speak. Face your shadow, for in it lies your wholeness. Release what is not yours, for only then will your true gift emerge. Stand as a mirror, clear and rooted, and let others see themselves in you, not their illusions, but their truth. This is the empath's path. This is the revelation of your true power. The empath's journey after deconstruction is marked by paradox. You have lost everything, yet you stand at the threshold of wholeness. What seemed like ruin is initiation, for the psyche cannot grow without rupture. And no one knows rupture more intimately than the empath. The collapse of your borrowed structures is not the end of your path. It is the threshold into the deepest mystery of the soul. In this mystery, you begin to perceive that empathy itself is archetypal. It is not simply a personal trait, not merely the product of childhood trauma or family conditioning, though those certainly shape it. Empathy is a movement of the collective unconscious, a manifestation of the archetype of relatedness. It is the soul's recognition of its own interconnectedness, the invisible threads binding all beings in the fabric of existence. Yet when unconscious, empathy becomes identification. You confuse the thread with the whole, believing that because you feel another's pain, you must also carry it. Conscious empathy, however, recognizes the thread without losing the self. It knows, I am connected to you, but I am not you. This realization demands the sacrifice of illusion. You must relinquish the fantasy that your gift exists to save others, that your sensitivity is your cross to bear, that your worth is measured by how much you absorb. Such beliefs are not truth, but shadow. Formed in the crucible of survival, they bind you to exhaustion, resentment, martyrdom. To be free, you must allow these illusions to die. And death, as always, is accompanied by grief. You grieve not only the structures of belief that collapsed, but also the identity you once clung to. You grieve the mask of the savior, the role of the perpetual healer, The illusion of indispensability, yet grief is sacred. It cleanses the soul of falsehood, making space for what is real. The tears shed in this stage are not weakness, they are baptism. They wash away the residues of projection, purifying the mirror of your being. And when the tears dry, you find that you no longer need to carry the world, you need only to be yourself. What does it mean to be yourself after deconstruction? It means to stand in the presence of the self, the archetype of wholeness, the living image of God within. The self is not an abstract ideal, but a lived experience, a center that arises when opposites are reconciled. For the empath, this means holding both sensitivity and boundary, compassion and power, light and shadow. It means refusing the false dichotomy of victim and savior, and instead embodying the paradox of wholeness. Dreams often herald this stage. I recall the dream of a young man who found himself in a vast hall of mirrors. Each mirror reflected not only his face, but countless faces of others' friends, strangers, enemies. At first he was overwhelmed, unable to discern himself amidst the multitude. But as he looked deeper, one mirror began to glow. In it he saw himself not as separate from the others, but as the axis around which they revolved. The dream revealed the archetypal truth. The empath is not a fragment lost in the collective, but a center through which the collective becomes conscious. You are not dissolved in the ocean. You are the point from which the ocean is perceived. Such recognition does not come without trial. For to stand as center requires the courage to be misunderstood. Many will demand that you return to the old role, to carry what is not yours, to soothe what should not be soothed. They will call you selfish when you set boundaries, unkind when you speak truth, unspiritual when you refuse to play the savior. This is the ordeal of individuation, to choose wholeness over approval, authenticity over belonging. It is the loneliness of Persephone, crowned queen in the underworld. The solitude of Christ, withdrawing into the desert. Yet it is in this solitude that power crystallizes, that the empath becomes sovereign of the inner realm. Power is a word empaths often fear, for in your early life, power was associated with domination, with the voices that silenced you, with the authority that demanded your compliance. You equated power with harm, and so you fled from it, cloaking yourself in meekness. But power, integrated, is not domination, it is presence. True power is the capacity to remain rooted in your being regardless of external pressure. It is the ability to say no without guilt, to say yes without fear, to speak truth without trembling. When the empath integrates power, sensitivity is no longer weakness, but strength, no longer fragility, but perception sharpened into clarity. The archetype of the magician offers a symbol for this stage. The magician does not absorb, he transforms. He takes the raw material of the world, the pain, the shadow, the chaos, and transmutes it into meaning, into healing, into revelation. The empath, awakened, becomes such a magician. You no longer drown in the sorrows of others. You perceive them, name them, mirror them, and in so doing, you transform them. Your presence becomes alchemical, a space in which others confront their own depths and find the courage to integrate them. This alchemy is not abstract, but deeply practical. Consider how often you once left conversations drained, heavy with emotions not your. In those moments, you functioned unconsciously, absorbing rather than perceiving. Now, after deconstruction, you can learn a new way. You listen, you feel, but you remain anchored in yourself. You ask, what is mine? What is theirs? And by drawing that boundary, you transform interaction from enmeshment into revelation. Others may resist this boundary, for it confronts them with responsibility. But those who are ready will experience it as liberation, life after deconstruction. Then is not withdrawal from the world, but a new form of engagement. You do not isolate yourself to escape empathy. You refine empathy into conscious presence. You enter relationships not as a savior, but as a mirror, not as a martyr, but as a soul rooted in its own depth. And from this rootedness, you bring to the world what it most needs: clarity, wholeness, authenticity. In this stage, synchronicities often arise, meaningful coincidences appear, guiding you towards those who resonate with your path, affirming that the universe itself participates in your individuation. You begin to see that your sensitivity is not random but purposeful, aligned with the unfolding of the self. The very patterns that once tormented you, repeated relationships, recurring wounds, overwhelming dreams, now reveal themselves as messages from the unconscious, directing you toward integration. What was once chaos becomes cosmos, order hidden within disorder, and here you glimpse the true mystery. Empathy, in its awakened form, is not about suffering at all. It is about communion. It is the recognition that beneath the illusions of separation, all beings share the same ground of being. To feel another soul is not to lose yourself, but to remember that you were never separate. This is the sacred paradox. You are distinct, so verein, individuated, and yet you are one with all that is. In this paradox lies the empath's true power. Do not think this realization will make life easy. Individuation is never easy. It is a lifelong process, a continual descent and ascent, a rhythm of death and rebirth. The old illusions creep back, the shadow re-emerges. The world demands your surrender. You will stumble, falter, fall, but each fall becomes a deeper initiation, each descent a new revelation. For wholeness is not perfection, but integration, the continual weaving of opposites into the fabric of the self. So I tell you, life after deconstruction is not a return to what was, nor is it an escape into detachment. It is the birth of a new way of being. in which empathy is no longer your wound but your instrument, no longer your prison but your liberation. You become not the carrier of the world's sorrows, but the mirror of its soul, not the savior of others, but the revealer of their own wholeness. This is your true power. This is the gift that emerges when the old structures collapse and the self arises in their place, when the old has been dismantled and the new not yet fully born. You stand in liminality. This is the in-between place, a sacred threshold where nothing feels certain and everything seems suspended. Many mistake this liminality for failure. They say, I have lost my face, my identity, my belonging. I have nothing. But it is precisely here, in the emptiness, that transformation takes root, for the psyche does not leap from illusion to wholeness in a single bound. It moves through the space between where the ground feels unstable, and it is in that instability that the deepest alchemy occurs. For the empath, liminality is especially potent. You are accustomed to defining yourself in relation to others, to taking your identity from the reflections you see in their eyes. In liminality, those reflections vanish. You look into the mirror and see not another's face, but your own shadow, your own depth, your own mystery. At first, you recoil. You wish to return to the familiar comfort of resonance. But if you endure, you discover that what you face in this mirror is not emptiness, but the self. That radiant archetype does not appear as a doctrine or a role, but as a living presence within you, guiding, whispering, drawing you into wholeness. It is here that the empath's true initiation occurs. You learn that you were never meant to be merely the absorber of others' pain. That was the survival strategy, the mask, the wound. Your true vocation is to become a vessel of consciousness, to hold the paradox of self and other without collapsing into either. You are not here to dissolve, but to reveal. You are not here to disappear into the collective, but to stand as an individual through whom the collective may become conscious of itself. This revelation is not abstract. It reshapes your daily life, where once you were drained by every interaction, now you find yourself able to stand present without depletion. Where once you mistook guilt for responsibility, now you discern with clarity what is yours to carry and what is not. Where once you equated love with sacrifice, now you understand that true love arises only from wholeness. In relationships, you no longer play the role of the silent martyr, absorbing pain to keep the peace. Instead, you bring truth, even when it disturbs, even when it disrupts, for you know that truth is the highest form of compassion. The archetype of the warrior enters here, not the warrior of violence, but the warrior of presence, who stands firm in the face of projection, who does not yield to the demands of others' illusions. The empath, who has passed through deconstruction, becomes such a warrior. Your sensitivity, once fragile, has become tempered by shadow, forged by fire. You can see through masks, discern hidden motives, and yet remain rooted in your own being. This is not hardness, but strength, not coldness, but clarity. Dreams confirm this transformation. A woman told me of a dream in which she stood in a vast field at night. The sky was filled with stars, each one a voice, crying, weeping, longing. She felt she would dissolve into the multitude, but then she realized that she herself was also a star, burning with light. Her light did not drown in the others, it joined them, distinct yet connected, and she awoke with the understanding, I am not here to carry the voices of others, I am here to shine my own, and in shining, I belong. This is the empath's liberation, to discover that belonging is not absorption but radiance. Life after deconstruction is not the absence of faith but the birth of deeper faith. The God you once worshipped in external images now reveals himself within the depths of your own soul. The sacred is no longer confined to cathedrals of stone or systems of doctrine. It is discovered in the living archetypes moving within you. Every dream, every synchronicity, every stirring of intuition becomes a liturgy. The whole of existence becomes temple, and your own soul becomes altar. But let me warn you, the world will resist your transformation. Those who benefited from your unconscious empathy will call you changed, cold, selfish. They will long for the old version of you, the one who carried their burdens and silenced your own needs. This resistance is the final trial. Will you betray yourself for the comfort of others, or will you remain faithful to the self that has been revealed in you? The path of individuation demands loyalty to the self above all else. It is not arrogance, it is obedience to the divine image within. And so, the empath who survives deconstruction emerges not as a victim, but as a seer. You become one who perceives the hidden patterns of the collective unconscious, who discerns the archetypes moving through society, who names the shadows others deny. You are no longer bound to soothe. You are called to awaken. Sometimes your presence comforts, sometimes it disturbs, but always it reveals. This is your true power. Think of the alchemical vessel. In the ancient texts, transformation required containment, a vessel strong enough to withstand fire, dissolution, and recombination. You are such a vessel now. Your boundaries are not walls, but crucibles, holding the opposites until they give birth to the gold of the self. In your presence, others may undergo their own deconstruction, for the mirror of your being awakens what has long slept within them. Some will resist, some will flee, but others will awaken, and through you, the collective itself moves toward wholeness. This is the meaning of your gift. Empathy, once unconscious, was wound. Empathy, made conscious, is revelation. It is the capacity to perceive the depths of the soul and to remain rooted in your own being. While doing so, it is a paradox of distinction and unity, self and other, held without collapse. It is the living image of the self expressed in relationship. Therefore, I say to you, life after deconstruction is not an ending, but a beginning. It is the threshold where the empath's true power is revealed, not in absorption, not in martyrdom, but in wholeness. You are not here to be broken by the world. You are here to mirror its soul, to reveal its hidden depths, to embody the paradox of unity and distinction. The cathedral has fallen, but the temple of the soul has arisen, and in its sanctuary burns a fire that cannot be extinguished. Walk, then, as one who has passed through fire and emerged as gold. Walk as one who has faced the shadow and integrated its truth. Walk as one who no longer carries the world but reveals it. This is your vocation. This is your gift. This is life after deconstruction. And this is the empath's true power. At last, unveiled